Today we are very fortunate. We have Mr. Akerson, the CEO and chairman of General Motors. And just to give you a little bit of his background, he's held a number of jobs prior to being at GM. He was the managing director of the Carlyle Group. At MCI Communications Corporation, he was the president, CEO, executive vice president, and CFO. He was the chairman and CEO of General Instruments Company, the chairman and CEO of Nextel Communications, the chairman and CEO of Exo Communications. He also serves on the board of the American Express and the board of the U.S. Naval Academy. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and also holds a degree from the London School of Economics with a master in economics. With that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Akerson from General Motors. Is the mic on? Oh, go ahead and tell me. Sir, did you turn your mic on?
No.
We have?
Got it?
There. Okay.
There you go. Thanks. If you'll allow me just a moment of reflection, I've actually been at this fine institution once before in my life. It was 43 years ago. I was a midshipman at the United States Naval Academy, and we were playing Air Force at Soldiers Field in the fall of 1968. And we came by bus and had to drive all night. 2 battalions of the Brigade of Midshipmen, and I don't know how many of those guys from West Point or Air Force were coming. But it was right on the heels of the Democratic National Convention, also known as a riot. Most of you weren't alive then, but if you think the country's in turmoil then, it was in a lot of turmoil then too. And because of the special relationship between the Naval Academy and Notre Dame University, a really welcoming and warm hand was extended to the brigade. We stopped here after driving all night, something like 10 or 12 hours. I don't know how long it was, it seemed forever. We were basically in sweats. And we were allowed to stop here, 700 plus midshipmen, shower and have breakfast, put on our dress uniforms to march down Michigan Avenue. It's something I'll always remember. It's very Midwestern, and it's very Notre Dame. And our classes were getting hammered pretty hard in those days. So it was nice because there was a reflection upon where we were at the time. We walked down Michigan Avenue and all these people were throwing garbage at us and calling us baby killers. We were 19 and 20 years old. So to your generation, hats off. The way the military is treated by your generation is a lot different than it was back when we were in the day. Sam, thank you for the introduction, and good morning. It's great to be here at such a great university. I welcome the opportunity. I give a few talks, many talks to colleges and universities, and they always seem to get pretty big audiences. In fact, I gave the Forstall lecture at the Naval Academy earlier this year, and it was amazing. All 4,000 midshipmen attended. My wife was there, and she was impressed with the attendance and the level of interest. But I knew why they were there. It was mandatory. At Notre Dame, you're a much more enlightened institution. You give out class credits for attendance. In my day, they call that a bribe. But you're here, and I appreciate your attendance. Now, as I stand here representing a very large, global, multinational corporation, home headquartered in Michigan, you probably think I'm going to make some joke about tomorrow's match between the Fighting Irish and the Wolverines of Michigan. As you may or may not know, it's the first time that they're playing a night game at the Big House. So this is just an opportunity that's hard to pass in terms of a rivalry joke. But instead, and given that this is such a great university, I thought I'd start with a quick test. What do you think this means? I'll give you a hint. It's not the odds of any one particular candidate running for the Republican nomination next year. That's Navy's record versus Notre Dame in the past 4 years. I said I didn't want to engage in rivalry humor, and I'll keep to my word, because when a team wins 75% of the time, that's the rivalry record of the last, how many games is that? 77 games. So it's not much of a rivalry, and so you should not be terribly upset about our streak. Of course, Notre Dame, I wish I could have gone here. It's a great school with a great football tradition and a wonderful educational resource for the nation. And just like Notre Dame or Navy, we're always looking forward at GM to the future. One of the keys to business, in my opinion, is to play for the future, not dwell on the past. And that's what we've tried to focus on in the last couple of years. At the Naval Academy, they were squarely focused on the future as well. It's not that this is a big game for Annapolis, for the Navy. It's just that we're very focused on October 29th at Notre Dame Stadium at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you guys think South Florida was tough, wait till you see this year's team. But let's look ahead and not dwell on the past. And let me talk about General Motors. We've come a long way, an awfully long way at General Motors since the dark days of bankruptcy in the mid-2009 timeframe. Today's General Motors is financially sound, we're gaining market share, we're adding jobs, and we're investing in the future. We've now had 6 consecutive profitable quarters. The most recent quarter, we had about $40 billion in sales and about $2.5 billion of after-tax profits. The liquidity of the corporation, roughly $40 billion. Contrast that with $40 billion plus in debt prior to the bankruptcy. Plus minimal debt today. We have about $4.5 billion of what I term cats and dogs, various debt instruments around the globe. Really equates to a fortress balance sheet. On Wall Street, people ask me, why are we so liquid? Why do we want a fortress balance sheet? The business model that we had prior to the bankruptcy, and this is something that you should all focus on as you move forward, is understand the business you're in, both intellectually and practically speaking. We're in a highly cyclical global industry that's competitive on scale that's hard to imagine. We have long product cycles, and the capital intensity is extraordinary. This year alone, we'll spend roughly $15 billion in capital expenditures and product development in terms of engineering. That's more than most companies have in revenue. We have to do that in order to remain competitive. The post-bankruptcy new GM, we have a new business model. We make money at the bottom of the cycle. And we are in a very cyclical industry. When I was in private equity, we very clearly bifurcated our investment thesis between defensive and cyclical industries. You want to invest in defensive industries in times of economic turmoil, such as we're in today. A good example, as you all know, would be a food stores company, a grocery store. Consumer products that can be postponed are cyclical in nature. This company was unable to make money when we were at the high cycle in 2007. It was actually unprofitable in 2007. In 08 and 09, they hit a 40-year low in terms of the cyclicality, and that broke the back of the company because of its balance sheet, because of its products, and because of its lack of competitiveness. We would typically increase and decrease our CapEx and our product development expenditures based on what we viewed to be the future. And the reason we would get real herky-jerky, up and down, plus and minuses on, and we estimated we lost $1 billion a year in stopped programs that we would engage in good times, only to 2 years later, being a down cycle, we'd cancel them. And losing $1 billion in a company that was cash negative for most of the first decade of the century required it went on the balance sheet, and it was a vicious cycle that the outcome was reasonably predictable. So today, in the new GM, we are not going to be a highly levered company. In fact, we're going to be a very low levered company. For the first time in a generation, we now have some very, very good products. For those of you that followed the bankruptcy, President Obama was quoted saying, "Why can't they make a car like Corolla?" Well, today in that segment, Corolla is dead last, and Cruze, the new Chevy Cruze, is the best-selling car in America and getting rave reviews. Cadillac is the best-selling premium car in America last year, and more to come. As you know, or may know, we announced an extended-range electric vehicle Cadillac that'll come out in late 2013. Buick is the fastest-growing brand in America today. For those of you, the graduate students here that have been in business, to think about Buick, which literally was your grandfather's car 10 years ago, the average purchaser of a Buick is 10 years younger than it was 3 years ago. We've got new fuel-efficient cars. We took one of our cars out of Europe, Car of the Year. In Europe, it was the Insignia. We made it the Regal, put a turbo on it, and for those of you young people, as you graduate from business school, you got to look at it. It's got BMW scared too. The promise of a helping hand by the federal government. I'm sure that question may come up. Was it worth it? Since bankruptcy, we've added 13,000 jobs. We've invested over $5.4 billion in the United States, and we are growing. So we're pleased with our progress to date. We are where we are today because of our intense focus on specific goals and objectives. The banner that we put forward, the motto is that we want to design, build, and sell the world's best vehicles. Let me first talk about our products. Many of you probably, your parents are driving Toyotas. Toyota's lost 3 percentage points of share in the last year. General Motors has picked up over 1 point of market share in the last 12 months. That was unheard of in the prior 25 years. Why? Because of compelling design, flawless quality, and reliability and durability. Since bankruptcy, we have won over 600 awards worldwide for our design, quality, and reliability. 2 of the top 10 American brands by J.D. Power's initial quality surveys are Cadillac, Buick, GMC. Our warranty repairs are down by 50% since 2007. That's a metric we watch because it's indicative of the post-sale issues that our customers may or may not have. We are leaders in fuel efficiency. We have some of the safest cars on the road. Our technology is surpassed by none, and we are moving aggressively into new infotainment and connectivity. The Volt has been heralded as a step forward. The Volt is a leap forward. For those of you, and many of you in this room, don't remember the space race of the 60s when America could do anything. This car is unique. 80% of the people in America drive 80 miles or less per day. On one charge, this car will drive around 40 45 miles on a single charge. And then it has a gas assist, an 85 horsepower engine. All it does is make sure that the battery is charged. You're always on electric engine. I had a car for 3 months during the captured test fleece when we were in the initial phases of rollout. My wife and I drove it for 2,000 miles. We used 2.5 gallons of gas. It's one of the times we went from Washington out to Annapolis to see Navy beat Air Force. So the engine cut on, kept sure, because it was 75 miles out, we needed a little assist. This is a car that you do not have to worry about. You could literally drive it from New York to Los Angeles without having to stop. That's not to say that we're not going to pursue battery electric vehicles, battery only, but battery technology, for those of you, I was an electrical engineer. Can't remember any of that, I'm so old now, but I was one day. But battery electric vehicles today, the laws of physics are such that depending on weight and aerodynamics, you're lucky if you get 60 miles. But when it's different than when you run out of electric charge, it's not because you're going to hitch a ride to the local station, gas station, get a gallon of gas and fill it up. You're going to charge that baby for 4 hours from a dead. We never let our battery go down more than 15%. Never. So the Cruise, the Eco Cruise, gets 42 miles per gallon. That's hybrid type mileage, and you don't pay for the electric assist. That being said, we are putting light hybrids in most of our cars today. Just this past month, the new 2012, both Regal and LaCrosse. Cross is you're probably not interested in mid-size sedans, the age of the group, but that will jump their on-the-road mileage to the high 30s and the high 20s in town. It's good news. So products and product development is a focus of the company, and it's done well. We're trying to strengthen our brands. We want strong and unique brands. Today, with 4 brands, and this was a big deal. I was on the board for a year prior to becoming CEO. The big risk coming out of bankruptcy, that going from 8 to 4 brands, that we would lose share. That was whenever you do that, if other companies that I've been the CEO of, when you take a brand or a product out of the market, does your customer base stick with you and transition to new brands, new models? And today, as I said, the first time in a generation for the last 2 years, we're taking share. So we made this transition from 8 to 4 brands very, very successfully. Chevrolet is one of the top 5 global brands, automotive brands in the world. It's the only brand in the world of the top 5 that gained market share last year and grew. In fact, Chevrolet in the first 6 months of this year sold 2.3 million vehicles globally. That's one about every 7 seconds. So I feel pretty good about this hour-long talk I'm going to have with you today. We'll be selling a lot of vehicles. It's the best performance in the 100 years. It's been 100 years Chevrolet's been in service, been in the marketplace, to sell almost 2.4 million vehicles in 6 months. It's the best 6 months Chevrolet's ever had in its 100-year storied history. And it recorded gains in almost every market on a global basis. Residual values, in other words, what is a car worth after 3 and 5 years, across the portfolio have increased because of the quality, because of the reliability and durability. The good news is we're profitable around the globe. Last year, we executed the largest initial public offering in the history of the world. When I was on that road trip, we got a lot of pushback from Wall Street, and we were around the world. We were in every major financial center in the world. We were losing $1.5 billion last year at this time when I came into that job in Europe alone. $1 billion on a run rate and $500 million in restructuring charges. And I made the audacious statement that I thought we could get that to break even by the end of 2011. So far in the first half this year, we've made just over $100 million profit in Europe. So that's been a huge step forward for the company. The pearl that's misunderstood about General Motors, or people are unaware of, we are the market share leader in the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The BRIC countries are estimated over the next 4 to 5 years to be 50% of the total vehicle growth in the globe. So that's where you want to be. You want to be in those 4 countries. Interestingly, after the BRIC countries, estimated by Global Insights, which is an independent firm that observes the industry, it's estimated that the U.S. will be the second largest region or area for growth in automotive, and we're pretty well situated here too. I remember going into bankruptcy before I joined the board, before I became part of management. I remember certain other competitors in the market saying that they were going to eclipse General Motors domestically, and in fact, we have been growing market share faster than any other company in America today, foreign or domestic. In the U.S. alone, we made $2.2 billion in the second quarter. And that's with a SAAR, a seasonally adjusted rate of sales, which we watch very carefully, of 13 to 13.5 million. Remember, at the high point in 2007, it was 16 million. So what that says is if we're making money at a relatively low point in the cycle, not at the bottom, if the projections for the industry are anywhere close to right, and they go back to 16 or 17 million dollars, the new GM is optimally positioned. Literally, we've gained share 7 out of the last 8 months in the United States in a tough market and a tough economy. With all the uncertainty of the summer, sovereign wealth debt concerns in Europe, our own domestic debt concerns and the arguments that persisted through most of July and August in Washington, and the erosion of consumer confidence to a low not seen in almost 2.5 years. Our sales in August are up 18% year over year. We're up 15 to 18% every month this year versus 2010, and in 2010 it was a magnificent turnaround. The fourth thing we continue to focus on, and I've touched on before, is a fortress balance sheet, recognizing that this industry does not support highly levered business models. Ford has learned that, General Motors has learned that, Chrysler's learned that. And you might say, well, good God, I hope they did. It's been an expensive trip or expensive education. You can tell your parents other educations are expensive as well as your own. We are taking this cash that we've generated and investing it in product and technology. And let me tell you why. I often reflect upon what the CEO of General Motors was doing in 1961. What was he worried about? And then I try to project ahead 50 years and say, what am I going to do to prejudice or advantage the CEO that's sitting in this office? Whether he or she, if I'm going to doom the General Motors of 2161 or 2061. In 1961, I was alive. You probably weren't. The CEO must have been thinking about just how big are the fins going to be on that 1961 Caddy. Could I get another 25 horsepower in that big engine? He wasn't worried about fuel efficiency, greenhouse gases, carbon emissions. He wasn't worried about alternative propulsion. The cars, if Chevrolet started in 1911, from 1911 to 1961, the cars weren't fundamentally different. In combustion engines, 4 wheels, and we got a few creature comforts and some safety regulations put upon the industry. I will tell you, your generation is probably the last generation that will rely wholly upon internal combustion engines. We have hydrogen fuel cars. We have many hydrogen fuel cars up and running today. They're very expensive. All new inventions are. I managed a company that invented high-definition television and won the U.S. standard. The first time we built a high-definition television that you probably all have in your dorm rooms today at $200, it cost close to $400,000. And it was as big as that slide presentation in front of you. We had motherboards. We'd go back and we'd mess with various components and try to perfect digital high-definition television. These hydrogen fuel cars are of great potential around the world. The problem is, I don't know of many hydrogen fuel stations. There's billions, if not trillions of dollars invested in carbon, various fuel sources, the pipelines and the gas stations. And I don't know just how popular it would be to turn over hydrogen fuel stations and have the government help build them to facilitate the infrastructure if Exxon were to get them. But they're where the cars are, because that's where the roads are. So these are questions downstream. If we do perfect this technology, whether it be hydrogen fuel, next year, give you another perspective, we sit on a reservoir. We are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And I know the oil companies have to deal with this fracking technology to make sure it doesn't foul the environment, but let's assume that they're able to extract it. Next year, we will come out with a bi-fuel, not biofuel, bi-fuel engine that burns both liquid gasoline that you're used to seeing and compressed natural gas. It too will be kind of a two-engine source, just like the Volts extended range electric vehicle, because the infrastructure for electricity is in place. We can use it. It's got to back it up with gasoline until battery technology advances, which I'm sure it will. As sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, I think hydrogen fuel cells will come into play. I worry about when the infrastructure will be deployed. But compressed natural gas is also an alternative. It's about 50% cleaner than liquid gasoline, the gasoline that's used to buying, and its fuel density is almost as good, not quite as good. So it's critical that we are able, at this point in our history, to continue to invest in research and development, engineering, and capital expenditures to make this transition from combustion engineering into advanced propulsion. And that's one of the reasons, at this point in time, as perverse and as difficult as the bankruptcy was, that we have a better, healthier, cleaner balance sheet. We have to develop distinct brands, brand loyalty. We have to develop brand attributes, and we have to differentiate. For those of you that study the company, read about the company, we've said unequivocally and unabashedly that we are going to develop a global dual brand strategy. When you look at our competition, Toyota is Toyota, and they have great brands. They have the Corolla, the Prius, the Camry, and others. Well, we are different. General Motors is not a brand. It's a holding company. We have 4 distinct brands in the United States. We have 2 global brands in the United States, and we're going to make Cadillac, as you've seen our ads, the world standard. We're going to take it globally. We must do that. We must develop diesel and right-hand drive Cadillacs for Europe, and quite frankly, we estimate by 2020, 40% of the premium brands in the automotive sector will be purchased in China, seconded by the United States. And with those drivers, that's where we're going to go first. Next year, at this time, we'll be manufacturing in volume Cadillacs in China. The best known brand that we have is Chevrolet. As I said, it's one of the top 5 global brands, and it's doing quite well. It's healthy. We have resurrected it, and these cars are great cars. These are the cars that people wanted to buy in the 50s and the 60s. Our challenge is to make sure that this storied 100-year-old brand is relevant today, especially for young buyers. Quite frankly, you. Young people today are much more aware, they're smarter, they're more discerning, and we want them to view Chevrolet as cool. Your mom and dad were cool one day. You probably can't imagine that, but trust me, they were. Marketers today, we've done something that's very non-GM or un-GM. We're looking at these under 30 this under 30 market, commonly referred to as millennials. That's what you all probably are. Not everybody here. I see there's some gray hair around the room, but most of you are millennials. Did you know that? Get used to it. We're the baby boomers that you all want us to die off so you don't have to pay all the Social Security. But someday your children will say, what the hell are these millennials? Well, your generation is 80 million strong. It's the biggest bulge in the population maturation timeline since the baby boomers. Next year, the millennials will make up 40% of the car buying public. We've spent a lot of time and effort researching this group. In fact, we've established a strategic relationship with, again, you'll find this hard to believe, with MTV. I thought that was a disease many years ago, but I understand what it is today. And we've created a SWAT team with a marketing research group within MTV called, I love these names, Scratch. Have you all heard of Scratch? Oh, good. They're studying you. They have a lot of information about the millennials. And essentially, in this combination, this affiliation, if you will, we have, in football parlance, an all-access pass to examine the assets that they have, the expertise that Scratch has, across all of their programming, sales, marketing, music, and research. And we're doing that so we can gain insights and ultimately understand and establish or formulate a strategy to pursue one thing, to convince millennials like you to fall in love with Chevrolet. And I think we've got a good shot at it, because when I came out of college, the only thing I knew when I thought about buying my first car is I didn't want to buy the same car as my dad, because I didn't want to be like my dad. Of course, as I got older, I realized what a great man he was, and but I didn't want to buy a car like he had. So I don't claim to know how young people think, but I know that if anybody does, it's probably MTV. So we are going to continue this partnership, and we think it's very important in order to align General Motors and our brands with this emerging new market. Another area of focus for us is to continue and maintain our focus on competitiveness. You wouldn't believe how complex this company is. Our revenue within 2 years of coming out of bankruptcy is estimated by Wall Street this year to exceed $150 billion. $150 billion. That's more than $10 billion a month. And what that says is this company, this great American company that is a trade engine, has revenue in excess of the gross national product of 150 countries. So it will keep you awake at night worrying about the complexity, and simply put, we have too much. And we are trying to serve the market. 4 of the 3 items or the priority that I listed for you, from brands to markets to products, were customer-oriented. This is a company that is an unbelievably complex manufacturing behemoth that has incredible intellectual property. And it was driven largely, managed largely by engineers, and customers took a, no pun intended, back seat. We are trying, and I think we are making progress in changing that culture to be more customer-centric. We want to serve the market, not the process, the internal processes. So the complexity of the company, our agility and our speed to market, and we have moved priorities around just in my tenure to more accurately and more efficiently address the market. Obviously, I told you about, we literally would see $1 billion of waste in a given year because of start, stop on different products. Our cost point, our break-even point has to be managed because you're in a great place right now. You're in university. It's a tough world out in the business market today. There's a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty just drives people like me crazy. But I don't know where this economy is going, and we have to have a break-even point and a fortress balance sheet to make sure that this company survives for the long term. And I talked about advanced propulsion. It will be the key for General Motors to make the transition into the 22nd century. We've been given a second chance. We've paid the majority of the money back that the American Canadian taxpayers fronted. We want to pay the rest of it back as soon as possible. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make the transition to electric, battery electric. We're going to have to go to compressed natural gas, biofuels, and we're going to have to go into hydrogen fuel cells. That will happen in all likelihood in your lifetime. How many are, you all heard I got a master's degree at the London School of Economics. How many of you ever heard of the economist Schumpeter? Joseph Schumpeter. Okay, the creative winds of destruction are critical to the capitalist system. The creative wind of destruction in our industry is going to be advanced propulsion and technology, and that's why we have to be strong, smart, and fast. Those are the three laws. Is that the three laws of Darwin's theory? There was a fourth. You have to be adaptable. And that's what we're trying to do, is to adapt the portfolio and the future of this company for the anticipated change, fundamental change from where this industry was for the past 100 years, and that's to advanced propulsion technologies. I'm going to stop here talking about General Motors because we're going to ask for Q&A, but Sam asked me to talk about my past. He kind of summarized it. I was in the Navy for 5 years, which I'm very proud of. I'm called a non-career graduate because I did serve for 30 plus years. I'm very proud of my classmates that did and thank them for the service. For any of you that are veterans, thank you for your service. And Sam, you're an Air Force graduate, thank you for yours. Not an Air Force Academy graduate, an Air Force veteran. That's better. You guys think you have rivalries with USC and Michigan. How many of you have been to an Army-Navy game? Well, you know. In my lifetime, I have been blessed, and I mean that, to have been at the epicenter of two tectonic shifts in American industry. Some of you won't remember MCI, but we took on, at that time, the world's largest, most profitable monopoly and brought them to their knees. It was a great company, and it resulted in the breakup of AT&T and the proliferation of technology you see today is because competition was brought into that industry. In kind of a associated area, as Sam mentioned, the transition from analog to digital technology. Local business, XL Communications, we had 1 million miles of local fiber in 62 of the largest cities in America. MCI, AT&T, interestingly, invented fiber optics, and we deployed it against them. Kind of a perverse turn of events. Nextel, I was at Nextel when it was worth, a friend of mine and I got control of the company. Its market cap was $700 million. 5 years later, it was $35 billion. I retired. And I went into private equity. And boy, those were the salad days. A little bit tougher now, but it was great. We had roughly $90 billion under management. I was responsible for all global buyout, the big buyouts for the firm before joining this great company. This is a great company. It's an American company we should all be very proud of. It's an international company that we're in the markets where we participate. We're good corporate citizens, and I think around the globe, General Motors is probably perceived much more positively in many foreign countries than it is in this country. We intend to rectify that in the coming years. So I'm proud to be a member of the team. Our mission, and that's exactly what it is to restore a great company to its heralded past. something you all be proud of. With that, I'll stop, and Sam, I guess we'll try to answer any questions you might have about General Motors or even me.
Let's go over to our chairs.
I'll let you sit over there.
Go ahead, whichever chair. Okay, we want to thank Mr. Akerson for giving us this time, with the wealth of information he has and the amount of time that he has to spare to basically take a day off and come to talk to you students at the University of Notre Dame. It's very gracious on his part. On that tone, we would like the questions to come from the students. So if you would please reserve your questions from anyone else. This day he is dedicated to the students here at the university, and he wants to hear from you and what you want to know about. Do I have a first question? There we go. And we have a microphone. If you would give your name and your major or your degree program, just so we have a little bit of an idea of your background.
Sure. My name is Wen Hao. I'm a student in the MSc program. You can see on my shirt, Master in Accounting. I just have a quick question. So when you took the office in 2010, so what are some initial steps did you take to make sure the company is going to turn around? Thank you.
When I came on the board or when I went on in the management?
Management,
role?
yeah.
Well, I was asked this question earlier today. The thing that I thought runs through almost everything we do is kind of a culture of the company. And I would say that 90% of what General Motors did prior to the bankruptcy was great, competitive, and 10% of it needed to be changed. Didn't require a wholesale change out. And when I say that, what do you mean? And one of the things we would do is, if we were developing a car, the benchmark was it better than the one that it succeeded? And that's not the way. If I'm competing with Sam, I want to look at what he's doing. Then the second kind of order problem you saw was they assumed that in 3 years when we roll out with this car we're designing today, or 4 years, that Sam was going to sit still. It's business by nature, and you should all recognize, as I've sent to the other business schools, and people look at me and they go, well, if you want a really kind of a constant life, maybe this is wrong too, but don't go into business. I was going to say go into, well, medicine, you can't say that either. That's changing all the time. But go into something other. Business by its very nature is Darwinian, and by that I mean the other guy's always trying to beat you and you're trying to beat him. And we had a lot of internal metrics and an internal perspective. We needed an external perspective on what the competition was doing, head to head, and then you had to try to guess, because to gain competitive advantage, where was the technology going? And everybody's striving to do that. So you had to change the culture of one that was more internally focused to one that was more externally focused. Clearly, the cost structure had been addressed. I often say to the management, the good news, we were in bankruptcy only 39 days. We didn't do irreparable damage to the brands. The bad news was we were in bankruptcy only 39 days because we were able to attack many of our operating. Manufacturing at General Motors, yesterday and the day before, I spent touring plants in Canada. We have negotiations on a contract next year with Canada. We're in the midst of them now with the UAW. I wanted to get a lead on what's going on on the plant floor, what we were doing. It's some of this, you would be surprised the amount of automation. We have anywhere from 300 to 500 robots in most plants, and the amount of software, if anything, it's needed. And you say to yourself, where do I get robotic technology? Where do I get the expertise to change it? Where do we evolve in terms of hydrogen fuel cells? Are we going to get the breakthrough before our competition? There are other automotive companies around the globe that are spending no money on hydrogen fuel cells. They think what we're doing is a fool's errand. Time will tell. But I wanted to get a culture infused within the company that was willing to accept business risk. For you that are in graduate school and worked in other businesses, the worst thing I can see is when someone comes up to me and you say, well, Sam, what do you need for this program? And he thinks he needs $250 million and he tells me $300. So, a couple of years later, he's a star and gets a bonus. Well, if he really is 250, I've taken 50 million out of the pipeline, if you will, that could have been spent on another program, and we sub-optimize. So when I go into a plant or we look at performance metrics within the company, if I see 3 months of just green, green, green across the board, I don't know, my conclusion is we're not stretching hard enough. I was president of MCI at 43 years old. I thought, man, I got it figured out. And the founder of the company and chairman he's in the International Business Hall of Fame. He was a big guy in my life. I was a real mentor. And he told me one time, he says, gee, Dan, if you got to stretch to make the plan, you made it 2 years in a row now, really stretch. And I did. And we missed the plan. That was not one of the nice days I ever had with him. So you've got to balance that.
Next question.
My name's Jeff. I'm in the MBA program here. Last night, President Obama had a pretty interesting speech, pretty fiery. I mean, it's basically a contract year for him, so he went after it. And it's a pretty aggressive idea to get people jobs. And the part that probably bothered a lot of people was how they intend to pay for it. Increase taxes on companies like yours. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Do you consider that maybe an unjust burden, or do you think it's a social calling, an opportunity to give back some of these awesome profits that you guys have been making to do some good that not a lot of companies are in a position to do? Further, if the latter, would you consider taking a very public and vocal stance in support of that type of bill to maybe sway opinion to actually get it passed? Because that would do a lot.
You know, since football is so ingrained in Notre Dame culture, I'll use a sports analogy. When a play's called, everybody's got an assignment. And in our system, corporations are there to make a profit and to enhance shareholder value. We are not a job bank. And I have a lot of complexity in my job. President Obama has an order of magnitude or more complexity in his job. So, to use a sports analogy, if I'm a pulling guard, all I got to do is pull and block. The quarterback's got to figure out what the hell's going on downfield. He's got to know what's going on here. He's got a much more complicated job. I'm going to do my job the best I can, and that's General Motors. And the policymakers, and there are a lot of them in Washington, and the president is in this analogy, the quarterback. He's got to solve that problem, and I wish him well. And I'm serious, I do. When I heard a radio host early on in his administration said he wanted him to fail, and maybe it's because of my military upbringing, you know, we all vote, and whoever wins, he's my president, or she's my president. End of discussion. And I want this country, first and foremost, to be successful and at peace. And he's my president. And until he's not, he's my president. And I want him to do well, and I hope that speech, I think it let out just a bit of editorializing. He's going to have to answer how he's going to fund this thing. That's the $64,000 question that was on all the talk shows this morning. I hope he has an answer for that. And I hope the American people get behind it. But, I mean, I'm not answering your question because there's no answer from my point of view. My job is to be at General Motors and do the best job I can.
Okay, next question.
That's the play that's been called for me.
We have a question over here. Oh, Dean Wu.
We'll go that way first. Is there?
They want you to go first, Carolyn.
Dan, sorry. This is Carolyn Wu, and I have actually just one factual question and then one broader question. The factual question is, Dan, what do you estimate to be the supply chain effects of a successful General Motor for this country? Yes. And that's just a fact. And second one is, America is having a deep crisis of confidence, right? I mean, right now, and General Motors is great. I think that this whole can-do is amazing. But I just want to ask you, what are the 4 or 5 things this country must address in order to really win, just like how you have won?
Okay. There have probably been books written to answer those 4 questions. Let me talk first about supply chain. You're all familiar with the supply chain in our business is so complicated, it's hard to describe to the until you get into the industry. If General Motors had gone down, the supply chain would have gone down. If the supply chain would have gone down, I can tell you, Ford Motor was hanging on by their fingernails. You would have seen massive unemployment in this region, the Midwest, and around the country. And I don't think it would have shown up in dealerships. It would have been pretty pervasive. So the supply chain, these are, it's not uncommon to have a supplier like Borg Warner that's a $10 billion company that you all, some of you would like to go to work for next spring. So it was important, I think, that both administrations, to the credit of the Bush and the Obama administrations, the unwritten kind of subtext of this rescue was the handoff behind the scenes, because Secretary Geithner and Secretary Paulson, depending on, we tend not in this country to look at things objectively anymore. We tend to look at it through political spectrum. And I think they did a terrific job. And I think the American public, regardless of your political persuasion, should, these 2 individuals and their presidents, their respective presidents, President Bush and President Obama, did a great job. In my opinion, I remember when President Reagan announced that he would have about a $100 billion deficit. I think it was the low point of his presidency. People were shocked. Well, we're running $100+ billion deficit a month now. We have to live within our means. And part of the problem is our generation and what it's going to cause for you. And that's entitlements, both Medicare and Social Security have to be changed. I'm not going to say anything here that's revolutionary or something you can't figure out yourself or haven't read. So we have to address our spending, our entitlements. I think the military increase in the last decade has been the biggest increase it was since World War II. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't feel as threatened as our parents probably felt on December 8th of 1941. I say that on the eve of September 11th. Pray to God that nothing happens. So I think we have to get our fiscal house in order. The educational system in this country is failing. We are not, we see that at General Motors. It happened in our industry. In my generation, there was a sense of entitlement that everybody should go to college. So, I'm 2nd generation in this country. My dad dropped out of college and went into World War II, and he retired 20 years later, 39 years old. One of the few master hard hat divers in the Navy. He was at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the invasion of North Africa, Okinawa, and Incheon. And he didn't get a chance to get an education. And I thought he was wiser than many of the professors I had, or some of the smartest people I've met in my life. But he wasn't smart. He wasn't a man of letters. He was just the real deal. And that generation had a sense of shared sacrifice. Our generation, and to a certain extent yours, is kind of all about me. And we're going to have to give more in everything we do. One of the things that I've seen in my lifetime is the destruction of the public school system. It was just a given when I was a kid. If you went to public school, you were going to get a good enough education to get into a great school. You'd have a fair shot. And I think we need to go back and kind of revamp education. In 1920 was basically the same way they're teaching it today, chalkboards and whatnot. Well, who the hell? I got grandchildren that can manipulate iPads better, probably as well as some of you. Pretty soon you'll be dated too. I won't say how much better she is at it than I am. But there've got to be new ways to teach our children and get them to world standard. And there's no question, there's a big difference in this country between rich and poor. If you're wealthy, you can send your kids to private schools. But I did not come from a wealthy family. And I thought I got a pretty good education. And when you go to the service academies by virtue of a congressional or senatorial appointment, you have almost a perfect distribution of the United States in your class. I will tell you, you have a perfect distribution. If there are 10 times as many people in California as there are in Iowa, you're going to have 10 times as many students at Annapolis or West Point than you have from Iowa. And so I saw a pretty good distribution, and I'll tell you what, I grew up in a town of 35,000 in nowhere, Minnesota, and I could compete. And I went to a public school. And you ought to be able to do that in America. So I think you've got to solve your debt problem, you've got to solve your education problem. We see it at General Motors. We're not getting enough technically trained people. The point I was going to make about my dad, when we came up, I have 3 in my family. My brother's a doctor. Everybody in my family wanted my brother. Every immigrant family, when they know they've arrived in America, they either have a doctor or a lawyer in the family. Well, I got an honorary doctorate last year, and I was giving my brother a hard time. Of course, it doesn't matter to him. He's a real doctor. But I told him, I can do everything you can. I just can't write prescriptions. But my brother, everything was to get my brother through, and that's how I ended up at Annapolis. I had to get a free education. It wasn't out of a calling to go to serve, although I was proud to serve. My sister's I was an engineer, and my sister was a teacher. And he wasn't about to fund anybody going to school to study art history. Because you went to college to get a job. You went to college to get a job. And so I think we have great jobs for people if they'd go to vocational school for 2 years. We'd get them good jobs that are good paying and got a lot of security. And I have a niece that I helped get through college, and she majored in art history, and I went, oh, geez, I don't know. I told my sister, I don't know about that. And then she managed to go on and get a master's in art history, and now she's getting minimum wage. She's editing some magazine in New York and living in a really not a very nice place. And you say, well, she's got a master's degree and an undergraduate degree, and I know there's probably somebody in here who's got an art history degree, and I'm sorry, my wife does too. But I just think, you have to earn your way in life. And so those are the 2 big things. Again, I'll leave that up to the policymakers in Washington. I think we've got to live within our means. I think there are going to be some hard decisions to get us from point A to point B, and I think we have to fix the educational system. I'm sure people can talk about Medicare. I'm not on Medicare, not eligible, and I don't want to be just yet. But I'm sure someone is going to say that we should fix the medical system, but I don't know enough about it.
Okay, before we have the next question, I know we have a group of students who have an 11:45 class. We excuse you at this time for those that have to leave. And if you do so quietly, and let's hear the next question.
Thanks for coming.
Hello? Oh, there we go.
Go ahead.
While everyone's leaving, my name is Kristen. I'm in the Master of Accountancy program. And I, first of all, Dan, wanted to thank you for your presentation. I thought it was phenomenal. You have a lot of insight for us. But I also, even though I'm an accounting master's student, I have a passion for marketing. And so I wanted to kind of talk about Scratch. You said you're working with MTV. And when I look at marketing, I have I just love looking at Apple and how they've started with the iPhone, but then they've gone back down to the iPad, which you said your grandchildren are using. And so you're saying that GM is targeting like the MTV market. Are you also trying to target the under 10 market? So when they do, when they're, they're 9 years old looking at a car, it's like, oh, I'll feel so special. They're going to look to GM and the brands that you have.
No, we're not looking at the under 10 market. But I'll tell you, if we're successful with the millennials, then you'll see a generation coming up. Your generation watched your parents migrate away from us because, quite frankly, if you look back at the mistakes that were made in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, are what doomed General Motors in the 90s and the 2000s. And it was a variety of issues, which if you're interested, I'll go into, but that's not the question you asked me. But we have to win your generation back. And that's going to be by picking them up and putting them down every day in terms of design, styling, quality, reliability, and durability. We just got to do it. And part of that is how do we communicate our message. So are we involved? For example, we started Buick Achievers. Goes to the education question. We spend $4.3 million a year. We give 25,000 scholarships away. 1,000 of them are full ride, up to $25,000 a year to young people that are 16, 17, 18, and 19 to get them to study science, technology, engineering, and math. And we think if we're in the schools and we're talking about, we're not trying to sell something, we're trying to position the company and its brands as part of Americana. And that's important. The other thing is, going back to your Apple example, because I know a little bit about that, and from my prior work experience, Apple really, I mean, a lot of you too are young and remember that Steve Jobs was basically fired by Apple in the early part of the 1990s. It was in my opinion, in 1999 when he came back, it was an irrelevant brand. It was an irrelevant brand and about to be extinguished. And it was because their management thought they were a computer slant software company. Well, they're not a software company. Now, my kids tell me Mac's cool and all this other stuff, but they're an operating system for a niche computer manufacturer, where they are bigger in terms, and there's lessons to be learned in every instance. And General Motors we learn from Apple as much as we do from Mercedes or Ford or anyone else. They had to decide what they want to be when they grow up or when they get a second chance. They essentially got a second chance, not by virtue of a government infusion of capital, but Steve Jobs. And he came in, and I'll tell you what they are. When was the last time you heard anything about Sony that mattered? They are the best consumer electronics company in the world. That's what they are. And, you know, when you look at an iPod, they didn't invent that technology, but they've perfected it and they communicated it, and their brand, you're a marketer, their brand communicates all sorts of brand attributes and differentiation. And that's what we're trying to. The Chevy Volt is so cool. Half the people that buy Chevy Volts are BMW owners. The average BMW buyer earns $170,000 a year. This is a completely different demographic for Chevrolet. It's a halo product. It is the iPad of cars right now. This is going to be a game changer, and that's why we're going to put pressure to produce more in the next 12 to 24 months. You'll see a lot more Volts, I think, in the next couple of years.
Okay, just to show you that all of our students are paying attention, we have somebody in the back row that wants to ask a question.
Hi, I'm Anna Fraser. I'm an undeclared business major. I kind of have two related questions. First, have you considered going into long-range alternative propulsion like Tesla motors? And second...
Like what kind of motors?
Tesla.
Oh, Tesla.
And then second, do you consider Tesla to have any future in the market? Because they're so much smaller. So just what do you think about their future?
What do I think about Tesla? Yeah. First of all, I see a Minnesota shirt. Are you from Minnesota? Where'd you grow up? St. Paul. Everybody went to St. Paul. Grew up in Twin Cities. Okay. Tesla is a battery electric vehicle technology using ion lithium batteries. There's no new news there. They charge over $100,000 for a car. We're getting criticized for a Volt that costs $40,000. I would never dismiss any competitor. That's what AT&T did about MCI. I joined MCI, it was a couple $100 million, and I was done, it was tens of billions. You can't ever underestimate what they can do or can't do. But their technology is well understood by us. It's well understood by our other competitors. Right now, they are a niche competitor. What they're doing is they've got an interesting looking design. I see the cars. They're small. They have to be. We're going to have to mass is a big element of fuel efficiency. And you say fuel efficiency, what do you mean? You're talking about gas? I'm talking about electric too. I'm talking about hydrogen fuel cells. So no, I don't dismiss Tesla. I think they've got technology that's part and parcel to Volt, and it's part and parcel to the battery electric cars that we have. I just don't think battery electric, where it is today, is going to fit. This is a gamble, and as I told you before, you've got to be willing to take risk. When we looked at our portfolio of electric cars, we concluded that the size of this country, it's not Belgium, it's the United States of America. People are going to want to drive from, pick a city, Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. Well, you can't do that with a Tesla. So what's the utility? Battery electric vehicles today that go, say, 50 miles or less are really urban cars. And people say, well, if I buy that, I'm going to buy another one so I can drive from Philadelphia to Richmond to see my son at the University of Richmond or something, or go from Detroit to South Bend to see, or maybe you're all going up to see Michigan this weekend. You wouldn't do that with a Tesla, but you could do it with a Volt. By the way, you get a $7,500 tax rebate, and if anybody wants to buy one, I'll help facilitate.
Our next question right here.
Hi, my name is Amin Asaba, and I'm an MBA student here at the university. I agree with you that natural gas, we have a lot of it, over 150 years worth of natural gas. We're discovering shale plays every year. I wish to know, some of your competitors already have natural gas cars. Natural gas is cleaner. It costs 2/3 less than petroleum and the gas we fill out of the tank. What is General Motors doing to be able to be the leader and innovator within the convertible natural gas car sector?
What are we doing to facilitate?
To be able to be leaders, because some of your competitors already have natural gas cars and they're benefiting from tax credits.
Well, we are producing natural gas trucks today, and I mean like vans for fleets, because right now you need to have a central fueling station like FedEx or the Postal Service or somebody like that, so they go back to a fleet location at the end of workday. Until you see natural gas fueling stations at the local Exxon or whatever, Sunoco, people won't buy them for their, consumers won't buy them. So we're selling natural gas trucks today to large telephone companies and power companies and whatnot. What we want to do is, how do we make that reach? Because if I told you I had a natural gas car today, you sound like you're an advocate of it, you wouldn't buy it because you'd say, well, if I drive from here to Chicago, I'm screwed. Well, what if I said, well, okay, after you're out of natural gas, you have a gas engine cut in. By the way, we've developed this engine such that it's the same engine that burns natural gas will burn liquid gasoline. And we're going to introduce that next summer, first in commercial fleets. But you have to have, because the infrastructure, as odd as it sounds, because natural gas is to most of your homes, but it isn't in central fueling locations like your local gas station. So the infrastructure, in some countries, the government is out providing that infrastructure. I don't think that's going to happen in this country in the current state of the economy. So we're trying to facilitate the market, build biofuel trucks and or cars over the intermediate term, and longer term, hope that the infrastructure is built, and then we'll be a player in natural gas.
Okay, we have time for just 2 more questions. Mr. Axton's on a very tight schedule, has to leave at noon. I have one on my left and one on my right, so we'll start up here on the left.
We can do 3. That poor guy up there has been how are you? Why don't we get him for sure? I hate to see.
All right.
Well, number 3.
Number 3. All right. Let's go with the question over here first.
My name is Rachel Vidal. I'm in the Masters of Accounting program. I have 2 fairly simple questions just because I'm kind of a car buff. One, the XLR was a beautiful car. Why'd you guys discontinue it? And 2, when I think of Chevy,
car?
The XLR, Cadillac XLR.
Oh, yeah.
And 2, when I think of Chevy, I think of a Corvette. Are there alternative energy ideas in the making for her? Do you think she could ever be as powerful with a non-combustion engine?
Okay. I'm glad you like the XLR. Not many other people did. So the ELR, which we announced out at in California here a couple weeks ago, will be a extended range electric vehicle. I will tell you, it is stunning. We rolled that out as a concept a couple of years ago, and then it was cut during the bankruptcy, so it's just been recently revived. We think we can get it to market in roughly a little over 2 years. You'll love, we're coming out with a high-end Cadillac here in the next year, less than a year, XTS, and then a BMW 300 fighter, we call it. It's the ATS. And these cars will be very, very competitive. And then the ELR, which is the electric car. So Cadillac is, in my opinion, a growing brand in terms of breadth and depth. But the XLR, as you get into business, you'll find out the same lesson I had to learn. You know, what I thought is great, the other million people didn't. You have to be careful with that when you're in my seat, because you could say, well, we're bringing back the XLR, and you know, you spend a couple $100 million, and you and your family will buy it, and the rest of your classmates will tell you it's butt ugly. They don't want to have it. I'm not saying it is. What was your other question?
Could the Corvette, do you have any alternative
Corvette
fuel
is
sources?
cool. And it's not cool enough today. I will tell you, the Corvette, I actually showed it, not the specifics, but the graphic designs of it to the midshipmen at the Naval Academy, because it comes out in 13 for the class of 14. I says, you guys that are all going to be flying F-18s, they buy anything fast. This is your car. Now, the Corvette that we redesigned this year is, there are improvements, but in terms of propulsion, you will see changes that Corvette owners of past are the most die-hard, loyal customers you'll ever see. And we may rock their boat here in the next couple of years, but I see the Wall Street Journal sitting down here taking notes. So, Sharon, I know I'm going to regret some of these comments today, but yes, the Corvette is alive and well, and you'll see some. When do you graduate? In May. Yeah. Well, a couple of years when you're making the big bucks, you come back with those things. But the Corvette's going to be. It's going to rival Porsche 911s in the next couple of years. It's a great car, and it's going to get a lot better, and from my point of view. I'm sure some of the old Corvette guys in the crowd or around the world will say, well, I don't like these changes. The change is inevitable, and the Corvette's going to be, both from a styling and from a propulsion perspective, a changed car. I'm not telling you it's going to be electric or anything else. Sharon?
Our next question.
Sir, my name is Jason Weintraub. I'm another Masters of Accounting student. You mentioned the analogy, Saudi Arabia is to oil as United States is to natural gas. And, someone else who stated that is T. Boone Pickens, a pretty large, proponent of natural gas. I was wondering what type of growth type of growth within the natural gas car market with GM is predicated on legislation currently and in the future.
Well, you'd like to be able to say that regulation and legislation doesn't matter, but it does. And believe me, I'm so dated on engineering, I don't consider myself an engineer anymore. But I will tell you, when you look at power sources, you look at energy density, how many BTUs can you get per volume? And gasoline is very difficult to surpass with today's technology. I mean, when you look at batteries, we used to look at nickel cadmium batteries and what the energy storage for that. If you look at a battery, it's kind of like a gas tank for electricity. Lithium ion is much more dense, and so we've gravitated to lithium ion. There may be another breakthrough. It may go to solid state. When it comes to gas, natural gas is almost as good as gasoline, but not quite. So we are going to continue development in this area on the hope and the presumption that the infrastructure will be built to facilitate it. I would guess in the next 3 to 5 years, it'll be mostly in panel trucks for telephone companies, FedEx type businesses, where you go back to a central fueling station. There has to be enough demand you see, in a planned economy, which I do not endorse, you know, people say, yes, we're going to produce so many of these type vehicles, so go out and build so many fueling stations, and 1 in every 4 gas station in America to Exxon, you will build natural gas fueling stations. That isn't the way it works in this country. So it's kind of who's first, you know, but the automotive industry has to show that we have the technology, it's developed, and it's available for, I think, the energy industry to take the risk of building it out. And there has to be market demand, which will be demonstrated by these initial forays into fleets, if you will. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, our last question up in the corner.
Hi, my name is Ethan Bailey. I'm a junior accountancy student. My question to you is, how do you manage all of your different brands to prevent cannibalism with one brand eating into the potential customers of another brand?
I'm not sure I understood. How do we manage others cannibalizing our brands?
How do you manage all of GM's different brands so they don't eat into the customers?
Oh, that's a good question. What I did when I first came into the job, I used to be on the Time Warner board, and they produced Fortune magazine. In mid-80s, they came out with a cover on Fortune because, so you understand, in order to be successful in our industry, you have to have global platforms, global architecture. So when you do qualify your supply chain, whether it be a strut or a shock absorber or whatever, we have quality all up and down the line, and that supply chain may extend around the globe. When you look at the cannibalization of a particular brand, you can have cars that look radically different that share the same part. But when GM first got into global architectures, they kind of interpreted brands as a global brand as looking the same, the skin of the car, if you will. So on the front page of Fortune magazine, they had a Pontiac, an Oldsmobile Buick, and a Chevrolet. And they were lined up like this on the front cover. And you could not, and believe me, I've studied this thing, you could not tell the difference between those 4 cars. So you talk about brand differentiation, brand equity, brand attributes. As I describe them, the swim lanes became too crowded. And so it goes to your point, how do we differentiate? So when we sit down and we spend a lot of time, we have a corporate marketing team. All we do, I sit on that, our chief marketing officer sits on that, our salespeople sit on it. We don't want necessarily the engineers on it. What attributes do we want associated with Chevrolet? Well, youth, styling, hip, all those things. Those are not attributes you would assign to, you want styling, but you don't want it to be necessarily hip and all this other stuff and youth oriented, because the average college graduate is not going to buy a Cadillac. They might buy a Corvette, but they're not buying a Cadillac. So like today, this month, we rolled out the Sonic. I told you the Cruise has just been a grand slam home run for us. I mean, this has rocked the industry. Well, that's compact. Subcompact, we're the only manufacturer in America, and this isn't because of the federal government's involvement. We're trying to prove a point. We're the first and only company in America trying to build a subcompact car in America. And the UAW agreed that they would take Tier 2 employees at half the wage rate. And we have employed every matter of lean technology you can imagine. And we've spent an inordinate amount of money on robots to make sure that we can take as much cost out as possible. That car, I drive one, it is cool. Got a great engine in it, moves, and this is we think could be another potential hit. It's our hope at this stage. I won't say expectation, but we just started rolling them out here. And it is a different demographic, a different profile of the customer that we're looking for. So we have to, and it depends where we advertise. I tell you, we're not going to advertise Cadillacs or probably Buick on MTV. We're going to advertise Corvettes, we're going to advertise Cruises, and we're going to advertise Sonics. And so you reinforce, by virtue of the media, the message and the media, what attributes, and because they'll be assigned or typical of a particular demographic that you're trying to address. So, but when you had, you're probably too young to remember, Pontiac and Chevrolet, Alfred Sloan, who was kind of not exactly the founder, but close to it, of General Motors, you read his book, he was trying to graduate people. And quite frankly, the increments were too close. The swim lanes weren't wide enough. So now we have 4. And I would say GMC, when you all think of GMC, I hope you think of professional. I mean, most average consumers, but if you think of a GMC truck, it's industrialized, heavier duty than, say, a Chevrolet. But GMC, so let's move GMC off to the side, although we do have crossovers in GMC. And so you're talking about Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac in this market. In Europe, we want to have Chevrolet, Opel being more like mid-market like the Buick, and ultimately Cadillac. And we're doing the same thing in China and throughout Asia. So you want to, I think, you want to kind of segment the market into thirds, and you want to have models that will fill in the holes. And that's what we're doing. Because you look at a Sonic, it'll retail at the bottom at $14,000. I'm telling you, that's a hell of a deal. And if you, what do they call it? They pimp it up or something? You add extras onto it, it can go up to $16,000. Well, then the Cruise kicks in, and that takes you up to the Malibu. The new Malibu we come out with in January, for you that are graduating, I'll put in a little plug so my trip was somewhat commercial. The Malibu, when we did customer research on it, we take all the badges off of a car, and we show it to 15 or 20 of you. More people thought that Malibu, the next generation Malibu, looked more like a BMW than BMW's owners thought it did. And Cruise just beat BMW in stability and handling in Europe. I mean, these cars we're coming out with, I mean, lessons have been learned. It's been painful, it's been difficult. But these cars, these American cars, are something to behold. And so when you can see where we take you in Chevrolet: Sonic, Cruise, Malibu. We're going to rename the Impala. I don't like the name, but I will tell you, I've seen, I mean, these cars we design out 3 and 5 years. They'll rock your boat, I hope. Anyway, thank you all. Sam, I just want
to... We know this weekend there's a little event tomorrow night that you either are probably going to attend or you'll attend with friends. And just because that you've been here, we want you to have a little something with a Notre Dame emblem on it that you can keep warm with, and hope that you would wear it.
I want you to know that I pull for Notre Dame in every game but one.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.